Ever wonder why Americans spend over $10 billion every year just to get scared? That's right. Halloween, with its costumes, candy, haunted houses, and pumpkin-spiced everything, is now the second biggest holiday in U.S. spending, right after Christmas. But here's the spooky twist. This massive celebration of ghosts and ghouls started as something much smaller and much stranger. Thousands of years ago, Celtic tribes in Ireland marked the end of harvest with Samhain, a ritual to blur the line between the living and the dead. Fast forward through Christianity, Irish immigration, and a whole lot of candy companies, and somehow we got spirit Halloween superstores popping up in every abandoned mall. So here's the question. Would you still celebrate Halloween if it was only about ghosts? No costumes, no candy, no skeletons dancing on TikTok? Because today, we're going to unravel how an ancient festival of spirits transformed into a billion-dollar candy empire, and how America turned fear itself into one of its greatest cultural exports. Picture a suburban street the week before Halloween. Porches are draped in fake cobwebs, inflatable ghosts nod in the yard, and kids rehearse the exact cadence of trick or treat like a ritual chant. Grown-ups are stocking candy bowls and scrolling costume tutorials. It looks like a neighborhood celebration, but behind the pumpkins and playlists is a multi-billion-dollar choreography of culture, commerce, nostalgia, and a little manufactured fear. In the last few years, American spending on Halloween climbed well past the mere $10 billion mark. The National Retail Federation reported a record $12.2 billion for 2023 and projected multi-billion totals again in 2024. That astronomical number would have surprised the ancient Celts, who started a festival that would slowly morph into the night we now call Halloween. Samhain, literally summer's end in Gaelic, marked the turning of the year, the last harvest, and the first long night. For people whose lives were governed by seasonal risk, Samhain wasn't a sugar rush, it was a night to manage danger. Bonfires were lit, animals were sacrificed, and people put on masks and disguises not to impress TikTok followers, but to confuse, ward off, or placate spirits believed to be freer in the thinning boundary between life and death. That older ceremony, in other words, was practical, ritualized, and existential. Fast forward a few millennia, Christianity shifted dates and rituals, medieval Europe added souling and guising, and by the 19th century, Samhain-adjacent customs had been layered with new meanings. When Irish and Scottish immigrants arrived in America in the 1800s, they brought bits of those traditions with them: bonfires, stories, masks, and those fragments found a new set of cultural building blocks to hook onto. American town halls, church socials, Halloween parties, and a young nation figuring out rituals that felt both communal and harmless. The holiday, which had been a mixture of dread and reverence, began to slide toward playfulness in this new social context. That slide is where the modern twist appears. In the U.S., late 19th and early 20th century Halloween was often a civic party-style affair. Parlor games, fortune-telling for the marriage-minded, and mischievous pranks. The trick part, pranks, mischief, stayed around. The treat part shifted. By mid-20th century, trick-or-treating was taking shape as a neighborhood custom, and candy companies smelled opportunity. In the 1950s, confectioners and their trade groups began actively promoting candy as the go-to treat. Cheap, pre-wrapped, and easy to hand out to crowds of small, costumed strangers. Those choices, convenience, safety, mass production, reshaped what people gave out on the doorstep, and in turn, how Halloween looked on Main Street.
So a few converging forces did the heavy lifting: migration and cultural mixing, civic and religious institutions that retimed and rebranded old rites, mass production and marketing, and the suburbanization of America, which created the perfect backdrop for kids to travel door to door. Costume manufacture moved from hand-sewn masks to factory-made outfits promoted in department stores and catalogs. Decorations that once were carved turnips became plastic pumpkins, animatronic skeletons, and entire yardscapes. Retailers and seasonal shops and later specialized pop-up chains learned to treat Halloween like a mini-season, with inventory, merchandising, and ad campaigns timed to squeeze demand into a few profitable weeks. Here's a small thought experiment. Imagine trick-or-treating without commercial candy. A night of roasted apples, homemade buns, or coins in a bowl. It's still charming, maybe creepier, but it would be a different holiday in scale and logistics. Candy solved a basic logistical problem, how to hand out something safe and attractive quickly, and marketing turned that logistic into a cultural script. Once the candy economy locked into place, costumes, decor, haunted houses, and parties followed, a virtuous or vampiric cycle that kept swelling the holiday's economic footprint. NRF surveys show this in dollar terms. Costumes, decorations, candy, each accounted for billions of dollars in recent years, which helps explain why Pumpkins Buys October now looks like a retail season on Fast Forward. There's another layer, storytelling and spectacle. Hollywood monsters, TV specials, and later, streaming and social media gave Halloween icons a global roll call. Witches, vampires, zombies, and slasher masks. American pop culture exported not just imagery, but a template, haunted attractions, horror nights, costume trends that other countries adapted and commercialized. In turn, global retail, theme parks, and media companies extended the holiday's life beyond a single night, sometimes turning it into a month of paid experiences. The result is cultural export, an old, localized rite transformed by industrial-scale entertainment into a modern cultural product. Now, the surprising part, that huge economy rests on a thread of intentional forgetting and reinvention. Samhain's original logic, survival, propitiation, boundary work, was replaced by civic play and then by consumption. Yet traces of the older rituals remain. Masks to confuse spirits became masks to entertain strangers. Bonfires turned into backyard scares. Liminality found a new form in costumes that let people try on other identities for a night. That combination, ancient ritual, mid-century convenience, modern marketing, and media spectacle is what made Halloween both sticky and scalable. So when you watch a kid parade past your porch and drop a Tootsie Pop into their sack, you're watching an ancient practice that's been repeatedly rewired. It's a ritual that survived because it was adaptable. It shifted from survival to community ritual to family entertainment and finally to a seasonal economy. And that adaptability is why something that once soothed anxieties about winter now generates conversations about supply chains, mall pop-ups, and marketing calendars. It's both adorable and a little unnerving. Next up, in the explanation, we'll pull apart the mechanisms that made this transformation possible. The institutional nudges, church and civic recalibration, the marketing engineering, how candy makers and retailers changed behavior, and the cultural engines, media and globalization, so we can see exactly how ghosts became goods. Halloween's evolution wasn't an accident. It's the result of three big forces working together like the gears of a haunted machine. Institutions reshaping rituals, commerce engineering behavior, and culture amplifying the spectacle.
Let's unmask each one. Number 1. Institutions, from sacred fire to school carnivals. Imagine Samhain as an early operating system. The ritual app was survival, the firewall was bonfires to ward off spirits, and the user interface was costumes to trick the dead. Then, Christianity installed a massive system update. All Saints' Day, November 1st, and All Souls' Day, November 2nd, rebranded Samhain into a church-approved remembrance. Ghosts stayed, but their marketing was different. Prayers for souls instead of pagan offerings. Later, in America, civic institutions joined in. By the late 1800s, towns and women's clubs reframed Halloween as a family-friendly festival. Instead of bonfires and sacrifices, you got school carnivals, costume contests, and bake sales. It was community PR in disguise. Replace mischief with organized fun. Think of it like updating an app to patch a bug. The bug was rowdy vandalism, and the patch was parades and parties. Without those institutional shifts, Halloween might have remained a fringe ritual. Instead,
It became normalized, annual, and scalable. Institutions gave it structure, a skeleton, if you will. Number 2. Commerce. How candy and costumes hijacked the holiday. Now, if institutions gave Halloween bones, commerce gave it flesh and sugar. The turning point was the rise of trick-or-treating in the early to mid-20th century. Originally, kids knocked on doors asking for coins, fruits, or homemade snacks. Cute, but inefficient. Candy companies saw an inefficiency worth solving. By the 1950s, candy was marketed as the perfect solution: safe, cheap, prepackaged, and, crucially, brandable. You could print pumpkins on wrappers, run spooky ad campaigns, and flood grocery aisles every October. Suddenly, instead of random snacks, kids expected candy bars. Behavioral shift complete. It's a brilliant case study in what economists call a supply-led tradition. People didn't demand industrial candy for Halloween. Candy companies supplied it so aggressively that it became the norm. And once candy anchored the ritual, costumes and decorations followed. Early costumes were handmade, think sheets with eye holes. But mass production made being a witch or Batman available in a plastic bag. And with suburbanization, the demand multiplied. By the 1980s, Halloween wasn't just candy night, it was a retail season. Spirit Halloween and other pop-up shops perfected the formula. Swoop into vacant malls in September, disappear in November, repeat, like retail ghosts. Today, the National Retail Federation surveys break it down. About $4 billion on costumes, $3 billion on decorations, $3 billion on candy, and another billion plus on pets, parties, and extras. That's how a festival of spirits became a festival of spending. Number 3. Culture. Storytelling and the global scare economy. Institutions structured Halloween, commerce monetized it, but culture made it viral. America's knack for storytelling and spectacle turned a one-night ritual into a month-long global export. Hollywood was the main amplifier. Universal Studios' monster movies of the 1930s, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, created an iconography of horror. TV specials in the 1960s, like It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, cemented Halloween as a family ritual. Then came the 1970s and 80s. Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. Horror became mainstream entertainment, and Halloween was the natural anchor for its imagery.
Globally, Halloween spread as both cultural export and retail model. In Japan, Halloween has grown into a massive street festival. In Latin America, it blends with Dia de los Muertos imagery. In Europe, it's adopted piecemeal, often driven by pop culture and retail. The US didn't just celebrate Halloween, it franchised it. But here's the philosophical twist. Why are people willing to spend billions on a holiday that's literally designed to scare them? Fear is usually something we avoid. Yet on Halloween, people line up to be chased by actors with chainsaws. The answer lies in psychology. Fear in a safe environment flips into fun. It's like riding a roller coaster. Your body screams danger, your brain says safe, and the result is adrenaline mixed with laughter. Halloween industrializes that paradox. Costumes let you play with identity. Horror movies let you flirt with mortality. Haunted houses let you rehearse fear, but with an exit sign glowing nearby. In evolutionary terms, it's practice. A controlled fear experience trains your brain without risking your life. In cultural terms, it's community bonding, sharing scares, telling ghost stories, passing candy. In commercial terms, it's the perfect product, repeatable, expandable, Instagrammable. So let's map this haunted machine. Institutions gave Halloween a skeleton by rebranding pagan ritual into church holidays, then civic festivals. Commerce added flesh with candy, costumes, and retail ecosystems.
Culture lit it up with stories, movies, and memes, turning local ritual into global spectacle. Each gear alone wouldn't be enough. Together, they built a self-reinforcing cycle. Traditions created markets, markets reinforced traditions, culture broadcasted both. By the 21st century, Halloween was no longer just a ritual night. It was an ecosystem of fear, fun, and finance. And maybe that's the real trick of Halloween, turning fear, the thing we usually avoid, into something we seek out, ritualize, and monetize. The ghosts aren't just haunting us, they're running cash registers. So when we zoom out, Halloween's strange story isn't only about costumes or candy. It's a case study in how humans repurpose ancient anxieties into modern traditions. A survival festival became a social festival, then a commercial one, and now a cultural export. It's about adaptability, creativity, and yes, a little fear. And that adaptability is why a holiday born in the shadow of winter fires can thrive in neon-lit suburban streets, and why the US turned its spookiest night into its sweetest empire. So, back to our opening question. Why do Americans spend billions of dollars just to get scared? Because Halloween isn't really about fear anymore. It's about transformation. An ancient Celtic ritual for surviving winter evolved into a cultural machine for play, identity, and community. We don't burn bonfires to keep spirits away. We hang neon cobwebs on our porches. We don't wear masks to confuse the dead. We wear them to delight strangers, impress friends, or go viral online. The meaning shifted, but the structure, the ritual, endured. And that's what makes Halloween more than a quirky night of sugar rushes. It's a case study in how humans repurpose fear into fun and tradition into industry. In a sense, we trick ourselves into thinking it's all about candy and costumes, but the real treat is what it reveals about us. Our creativity, our appetite for storytelling, our ability to laugh at fear and find joy in the dark. So, the next time you see a kid in a tiny vampire cape or an adult in a wildly over-engineered group costume, remember, you're looking at the ghost of Samhain, remixed by centuries of culture, commerce, and imagination. What about you? Would Halloween still matter to you if it was only about ghosts? No candy, no costumes, no memes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because whether we admit it or not, fear is fun. And that's Halloween's real magic.